Love. Some would say it took a backseat when the pandemic forced us apart. As a family-run and proudly Canadian-owned company, Charm Diamond Centers saw the need to bring us together with tales of love and created the Canadian Love Map podcast. Since then, we've shared hundreds of real, uplifting stories that prove love conquers all. So thank you for listening. We couldn't do it without you. And remember, love starts here.
This is a true Canadian love story.
We were meant to be together.
I can't imagine my life without you.
Honestly, he's the light of my life.
It's nice to be in that tractor beam of love.
I'm her biggest fan.
I think I knew I'd lost my heart again.
I knew I wanted a marriage like that.
Difficult roads can lead to very beautiful destinations.
Well, love is the most important thing.
One day he said, well, I'm going to Canada. It would be lovely if you'd come with me, but we'd have to be married. And that was the proposal I got.
Can I say that one in my words? It was my bloody proposal.
Hi, I'm Nancy Regan. This week's love story belongs to Christine and Chris from Fort Langley, BC. When you hear about a couple who met when they were 16 and have been married for nearly 60 years, you might jump to the conclusion that their story is predictable. But the path of love is rarely straight, and Chris and Christine are living proof of that. The twists and turns of their love story might just leave you breathless. You can read all about it in the book The Choirboy and the Bellydancer, but you can hear it from them today. This is the Canadian Love Map. Christine and Chris, hello, and welcome to the Canadian Love Map.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you very much.
I wonder how many people who see you on a regular daily basis know that you are a choir boy and a belly dancer.
Well, they didn't, but they do now.
She's dragged you both out of the closet, I guess.
That's right. And of course, we weren't that at the same time. The cover on my book looks a little lurid because I'm 70. I'm 17 in the photo and Christopher's 12. But of course, it happened at different times in our lives.
Well, your book brought you onto our radar, and we were so excited when you said that you would be guests on the podcast. So I am really keen to dive right into your story. You say you met when you were 16. Set the scene for me, if you would.
Sure. I got kicked out of my lodgings. I was on my own because my parents were in the Middle East, and Dad's company would only pay for kids under 16 to go and join him. So I was out. I got a job. They fixed me up with digs.
And this is in the UK at the time?
Yes, it is.
Were you both born there?
I was born in London. Christine was born in Sussex.
Yeah.
Okay.
6 months apart. During the war, the end of the war, I'm flipping around all over the place here, but part of the book, it goes into Chris's childhood. He got buried when a bomb hit his house and got found the rubble, and a fireman found him. Very angry 6-month-old baby.
Oh my gosh.
Mum rushed to hospital. I know. Yeah, so there was almost no book to write. Anyway, back to us being 16. At 16 years old, I was working in the same shop as Chris. And it was hand-to-mouth existence because I was paying for my digs. Chris was still living at home. And I was kicked out of my digs because I had this penchant for reading horror stories at night under the bed. And I was reading The Haunting of Toby Jug by Dennis Wheatley. And just as the embodiment of evil was slithering over through the window to devour Toby Jug, the cat started yowling outside on the dustbins. And I went screaming into my landlady's room, and she was very nervous, and that's the only reason she had me there, because her husband worked nights and she was so nervous. So she started screaming and I started screaming because I thought she could see what I could see. And anyway, I realized what was happening, gave her a cup of tea, which was my grandmother's panacea of everything, and carried on as normal, went to work, came back from work the next day, and her mother was standing there saying, "Get out. My daughter's in hospital with a nervous breakdown because of you." So I talked her into allowing me to stay overnight. Went into work next day with my little suitcase. And it was a young crowd, wasn't it?
Yeah. We had a lot of new staff.
Yeah.
So, Chris, you saw Christine arrive with her suitcase. You tell me the next part.
Okay. But Christine and I weren't an item at this point at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She was just one of the new girls who all the other guys were chasing, and I wasn't going to join the queue. Anyway, she came into work and she told us what happened. And I said, "What are you going to do?" She said, "I'll check. Someone will give me a room for the night." Well, I went about work, and at 5:30 that night, I said, "Do you have anywhere to stay?" And she said, "No, I don't know what I'm going to do." So I said, "Well, you better come home with me, and my mum will look after you." So
wonderful.
Took her to the bus station. She got on the bus, and I cycled my bike behind it down to a little place called Bracklesham Bay in Sussex.
On the coast.
On the coast, right near the beach. And took her in and said to Mum, "Christine's got nowhere to stay. Can she stay here?" So she said, "Yeah, she can sleep with the girls, my two sisters." So 3 of them slept in the same bed for 6 months.
Wow.
And by the end of the 6 months, we were an item.
The sparks were flying.
Right.
Yeah.
So that in a nutshell is how we...
Yeah.
All right. So you'd think a lot of people might expect that the story would naturally evolve. You'd get married, you'd settle down, but there was a big detour.
There was a big detour, yes. By the end of that year, I got a call from my dad's company who said, "Okay, your parents want you to join them in Aden now." And
where is Aden?
In the Middle East. It's now part of Yemen, but at that time it was a British crown colony. And my dad was a civil engineer there, building roads and bridges and so on. Well, I arrived about a week before my 17th birthday, and my mum adored parties, and this was a big excuse for her to give one. And Mum, unlike most of the expats there, Mum loved the local culture. She had a lot of Arabs among her friends, and Dad too, come to that, and so she invited all these amazing people to my party. The chief of police, who gave me a driver's license, by the way, without me ever touching a car.
On the sly.
And yeah, and in that party, they brought along this pop singer, an Arab pop singer. He was really famous, big fish in a small pond, I guess you'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And he played, and I loved the music. I actually thought I'd hate it when I first got there because it was, to me, cacophonic. But when you heard it up close, all the quarter tones, and I don't know, I probably had a couple of drinks and.
Sorry.
Your husband choked on that a little bit. Was that because you think a couple is an understatement, Chris?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And that makes me sound like a lush, and I'm not really. Anyway, I kicked my shoes off and I started dancing. Just any sort of dance. It was just really got into my bones. And Ahmed was his name, and he came by the next day and asked if he could take me out for lunch. And fickle me, I've got Christopher on my mind, but this was all rather glamorous, being invited out by a pop star. And one thing led to another, and he asked if I would dance with his band in the theatre. It was a huge theatre. Well, for it was 2,000 seats, which made it pretty big. Mum and Dad, of course, said absolutely not. And I started sulking, and because I have a bit of a disability, it's a progressive thing. Mum was always awfully pleased when I did anything that would have been a bit impossible. It's a neuromuscular thing, and it affects balance and so on. So Mum was delighted that this was happening. And Dad finally agreed if I gave any money I earned to Mum's charity, which was a school for the blind. So I was fine with that.
It was for a good cause.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and of course the majority of the audience was men. And when I think back, I can understand my mum and dad being a little bit dubious.
Mm-hmm. You were a young, impressionable 17-year-old.
That's right.
She was bloody good looking too.
Well, inevitably, a romance blossomed between Ahmed and I. And again, he turned out he was married. But he said, but I can have 4 wives in my religion. So next thing I go to my mum and say, okay, I want to change my religion. I'm going to become Islam so I can marry Ahmed.
Oh my gosh. You were going to become part of the pop star's harem.
Yes.
I hadn't thought of it that way. I thought he was quite kind because he wouldn't divorce his first wife. Oh. And as he said, they married very young, and that was the way things were done, and it wasn't her fault. So I thought, yeah, that's okay. Anyway, I was really in love with the whole scenario, the fame. And poor Chris, inevitably, I wrote the Dear Chris letter, But by that time, now he denies this, don't you?
No. I never received the letter.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I want to hear this from Chris. You didn't receive the letter, or you burned the letter?
Oh, no, I didn't get it. But then again, if I had been living down in Sussex, and after Christine went off to Aden, I moved back to London. Oh. So I was living in North London, and the letter wouldn't have come to where I was there. It would have gone to my house address. Well, my mum was a bit strict, so she might have just deep sixed it anyway.
Wow.
I don't know, and I only found out about this letter a little while ago.
Well, it was last night.
Yeah.
or when we were talking to Sarah.
When we were talking to the other lady.
And were you still carrying a torch for Christine while she was off dancing with pop stars in the Middle East?
He got engaged to the woman I said, look after Chris for me.
I didn't. We went to a party one night, and I had maybe just a touch too much to drink. And the next day they said, you got engaged last night. Congratulations. And I said, no, I didn't. I don't remember saying it, so it didn't happen.
But Phyllis said so.
Yeah, anyway.
Oh, funny.
That went on the board.
Anyway.
Okay, so he didn't get the letter. You thought you had broken up with him. And what happened next?
Well, Mum and Dad obviously refused. What they did was said, okay, give it a year. We'll go back to England. And Dad by now had got fired because of my dancing. Poor Dad. I mean, he got another job out there very easily, but he had a rather stuffy company that said, well brought up young English girls do not do this sort of thing.
And was it actually belly dancing you were doing?
It wasn't true belly dancing. It was my version of dancing, but, they called me the English belly dancer, although it was just sort of spontaneous stuff all the time.
It was belly dancing.
He said, she said.
We've been married for 57 years. We might not make 58 next year. Okay.
Yeah, you can blame me, I guess. Creating division.
So I think looking back, now memory is a very slippery thing, but looking back, it seems to me I was almost relieved at the idea of giving it a year because there was just something that, I don't know, it seemed a bit off.
Well, sorry, what were you giving a year?
Oh, Mum and Dad said let's give it a year, and if you still feel the same way, you'll have our blessing.
Oh, to actually marry the pop star? I didn't hear about an engagement there. Sorry.
No, well, that's right. He asked. There was no official engagement, but if we felt the same way after a year in England, that was the key. I had to go back to England, which I did with Dad and the family. And it was funny because on the ship, we went back by ship. The year was 1962. 62, I guess. And
61, yeah, 61.
yeah, 61, 62. And I remember looking down the deck, and there was a young guy about my age with ginger hair. Christopher had ginger hair in those days, curly ginger hair and freckles. And I thought, oh, he reminds me of Chris. Oh, wonder how Chris is, wonder. So it was like a bit of a wake-up call. Anyway, I decided with my new veneer of sophistication, I'd ask Christopher and a girlfriend, if he had a girlfriend at that point, to come and meet me.
You knew it was Phyllis.
No, not until she walked in the door.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
I got his address from his mum, and she did say to me, he is engaged, I said, oh, I just want to, just give him my respects and pick up. And Chris did bring Phyllis down. I was living in lodgings again, a dreadful place where I had one room, shared bathroom, and the room was dominated by this enormous Victorian bed. And there was one chair. I went out and I bought canapes and I had some wine. But of course, two people had to sit on the bed. And you could have blown me away with a feather when Phyllis walked through the door. This was, okay. So I sat her on the chair and Chris and I sat on the bed.
Right.
Well, that's clear messaging.
You carry on, it's your story.
Yeah, it's our story now.
This podcast is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, Canada's largest family-owned jewelry store. They are proud to be putting love on the map, and the staff at Charm Diamond Centers are thrilled to be a part of your love story too. So visit charmdiamondcenters.com or one of your local stores. Love starts here. Chris, were you excited to see her again? You had heard from her, been invited. What were you feeling about this?
Well, I didn't know what to feel because I hadn't heard anything from her at all. So, and then suddenly this came out of the blue. So I went down there to see her, and I had no expectations at that time in any way, shape or form. And, but after the meeting, which went, as Christine said, like the longest day.
I've had months that were shorter.
I went back to London and I was living with a bunch of other guys in Finsbury Park.
In a hostel.
In a hostel, yeah, a company hostel. And my roommate, who was from Hong Kong, I told him the story about Christine. And he said, well, do you want to get back with her? I said, yeah, I'd love to. But I said, I don't write that kind of stuff. He says, sit down. Take out his, he said, write what I tell you. And he dictated a love letter.
Oh, it was the most marvelous thing. Yeah.
It was like Cyrano de Bergerac all over again. I didn't write, the only thing I wrote at the bottom of that was my name. Yeah.
Do you still have the letter?
No.
No, they're long gone. Anyway, I sent that off to Christine and I got a reply. And arranged for Christine to come up and see me in London at the weekend. So she'd come up for the day. So I sent her train fare down and she came up on the train and we went out for lunch and we went to the cinema in Leicester Square the afternoon. And then she got the last train back in the evening. And we did that, twice a month?
Oh, I thought it was every week.
Every weekend? No,
yeah.
Almost every weekend anyway.
I thought he was really wealthy because he was sending me this money. He was actually spending just about all his wages.
Yeah. I was living on beans on toast the rest of the week.
That's beautiful.
But, anyway, Christine would come back and forth. And finally, a mate of mine who was in the hospital had a girlfriend in Ireland, Dolores, and he wanted to bring her over to London. So we said, okay, we can find an apartment the two girls can share, and then they can afford to live with it. Expensive even then. Well, the lady in my shop, Mrs. Gunn, had an apartment at the top of her old Victorian house.
2 rooms.
2 rooms. 2 rooms and a landing.
Apartment sounds too great.
And the toilet was in the back garden. But it was a nice sized living room. Anyway, so Dolores came from Ireland. Christine came from Sussex. They met at about 2:00 in the afternoon in the apartment. We all met there. And that night, those two girls slept together.
I mean, we had to sleep in the same bed. There was only one bed.
Which they did for a long time after that. They had to share the bed. There was only one for one bed. Anyway, so they came, and so now Christine was in London, got herself a job, and we went on from there.
Yeah, I think what cemented the idea of moving up to London for me was that train, because the last train meant a connection in a village, a small village, to connect to the town I lived in. Excuse me. And I missed the connection one night and had to spend the night in jail because I had no money, there were no credit cards then. And even if there had been a place to stay, I couldn't have afforded it. So I did what all well brought up young girls did and went to the police station and asked for help. And they said, well, you could sleep in the cell and we could bring you back breakfast, but that's 7 shillings and 6pence. And I had 2 shillings on me. So the cop, he was a lovely old guy. He was very avuncular, And he said, but if you haven't got it, you can drop it round sometime. So I slept in the cell that night. And next morning, they brought me this full English breakfast. It was wonderful. Oh, he left the cell door open so I didn't have to use the bucket in the corner. I could use the toilet. But this breakfast made me think, my landlady's breakfast paled in comparison.
Jail was looking good, I guess.
A life of crime, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, that decided me. I thought, yes, London. I'm going to move up there.
Barnston, that was it.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have this visual of you weighing Chris or crime. Chris or crime.
Yeah.
So, where did it go from there?
Well, Chris would come and meet me on his half day. I got a job in the West End of London. And he'd come and meet me and we'd walk around the park or something. And one day he said, well, I'm going to Canada. It would be lovely if you'd come with me, but we'd have to be married. And that was the proposal I got.
Can I say that one in my words? It was my bloody proposal.
Over to you, Chris.
We went, we had something to eat, and then we went into Hyde Park and we were sitting by the Serpentine there on a bench. And I said, I really would like us to get married.
Oh, you did, right.
But I'm going to Canada next year. So if you're not interested in going and immigrating, then maybe you've got to put that into your equation. And Christine just sort of quiet for a couple of ticks. And then she sort of turned and says, Canada. Never been there. Okay.
Well,
that was it. That was it.
Was there any getting down on one knee or anything that you're not telling me about?
No, we were just sitting on the couch. I didn't even have a ring at that point.
No, that's right. Anyway, when people heard about it, they gave us 6 months, but proved them wrong, didn't we?
I guess you've both got the last laugh. So Canada brought new adventures.
Right. When we got to Vancouver finally, it was pouring with rain, as only Vancouver Novembers can bring it down, and we spent our first night in the little hotel on, I don't know if you know Vancouver, but Hastings Street is sort of the edgy bit of Vancouver. And I remember, we tucked into bed, okay, we're here, this is our new life. And the window opened about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I saw this leg come through. I thought, my first thought was, it was a window cleaner. And then I realized it wasn't a window cleaner, it was a burglar, and I switched the light on. And the leg disappeared. And the
fire escape was right outside.
And this was your very first morning there.
First night in
Welcome
Vancouver,
to Canada.
Yeah. And we called down. There was actually, the hotel did have a desk clerk at night, which was great.
They called the police.
The police came up and Christopher just turned over and went back to sleep.
I did, guys.
Didn't you? Okay.
You love that bit of the story.
I do. Anyway, I'd never seen a real gun. So the cop sitting on the bed showing me his gun, I thought, oh, is that a real gun? It was fascinating because we'd only ever seen guns in movies.
Because the bobbies in London would have had the batons.
Truncheons. Yeah.
They didn't even carry those in those days.
So it's been almost 6 decades together. And I am really interested to know, having witnessed your hilarious repartee, I'm really interested to know what it is you love most about each other. Chris, I would love to hear from you first.
Christine, I've always told everybody, if you live with Christine, you're never bored because you never know what she's going to do next, right? And some of the zaniest things come out. And always, in her mind, she has a perfectly logical reason as to why she just did that. And it makes for a very hilarious lifestyle. It's good. She's also my very best friend and lover. And we have a great time together. But the crazy thing is, I have a very London way of talking, especially if I get a little excited. And if people come into this house, I swear to you, they heard me talking, they would swear that I didn't like her at all. Because some of the expressions that are used, they're old London expressions. And today, you're almost forbidden for saying them. But in our house, it's common.
Do you dare give me an example?
Well, obviously, I always call her a silly cow. What do you do that for? Or a daft cow or something like that.
And some you really wouldn't want to put on a podcast.
And do you see those as terms of endearment, Christine?
Well, I love Chris's sense of humor. He can make me laugh even when I feel down. And we usually find that one of us is down, the other one's up, and so on. So we can balance each other out. Yeah. But and the loyalty and there's a lot I love about him. Sometimes it's like, what the hell am I doing in this relationship? But that's marriage, isn't it?
That's terrific. So I gather you had this story forming in your mind for a while in terms of putting it into a book. Have you been tickled pink to hear people's reaction to your book, The Choirboy and the Bellydancer?
Doesn't begin to describe it.
It's the understatement of the year.
To be honest, when I started it, I thought this will be a nice project for my grandchildren, give them the backstory and that. Ironically, I think my son's the only person who hasn't read it. That will come. It was only when I started reading bits out and found the editor and she said, no, this is beyond that, beyond your grandchildren. This is a good memoir. And the reports, I mean, just the reviews on Amazon are amazing. And I'm just not just tickled, I'm actually, it sounds really corny, but I'm quite humbled because, it's amazing how entertained people are by it.
Well, that's wonderful. I look forward to reading it. I really do. Thank you so much, both of you. Chris and Chris squared.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Nancy.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks so much for listening to the Canadian Love Map. If you love us, please subscribe and share. We'll be back next week with another love story to add to the map. This podcast is presented and made possible by Charm Diamond Centers. It's hosted by me, Nancy Regan, and is produced and distributed by Podstarter.
This has been a Podstarter production.